This is probably a terrible idea. And again, I've never been afraid to dive headfirst into a bad idea, so what the hell? The conversations around women's sports at the moment have devolved into nothing more than a bunch of extremist ramblings. It has become, hold on just one second, it has become toxic, and it really shouldn't be that way. On one side, you have culture warriors who are more or less trying to oppress women, a concept that for some terrible reason resonates with uneducated people. They literally want to focus these discussions on anything other than sports, but do so under the guise of sports because of, I guess I'll get back to you. On the other side are folks who basically accuse anyone who doesn't pledge their undying support for women's sports as a sexist. So yeah, there is a huge middle ground in between these two extremist positions, yet no one really seems to want to broach it. Today though, I don't know, let's see if there's anything worth salvaging in this gooey caramel center of rational thinking. Look, I know I'm just gonna piss people off anyway, so screw it. I've already fallen afoul of individuals on both sides of this debate anyway, and quite frankly, your worst can be no worse than that of Auburn fans from last year. That aside, let's start with a point that gets lost in the shuffle of all this kerfuffle. Way back in the day, professional football and basketball had some major issues with public support. There were so many noisy people out there who refused to give it a chance, claiming it wasn't as good as collegiate ball. Sounds familiar, no? The thing about the NBA and the NFL is that they carried on despite the doubt and what was sometimes baseless ridicule of what they were doing. The journey was not easy, but they kept trying, grew, and became the sports they are today. All because they were given a chance to succeed through increased visibility. The same individuals today claiming women's sports don't deserve a chance would have been the same ones way back in the day arguing against the NFL and NBA, yelling about how they don't deserve to have games on TV or broadcast on radio because they're just not that good. Of course, many of their arguments never focused on the on-field product. It was always targeting these weird other topics. Again, it's all kind of familiar. Now, I'm not saying the WNBA, NWSL, and any other women's professional sports league out there is going to reach the heights of the NFL or NBA, but at the very least, why not give them a chance, give them a platform to grow? The popular sports of today needed time, and quite a bit of it if we're being honest, to find their footing, to build an audience, to reach people and become what they did eventually become. Not only is the courtesy of a long runway being taken away from women's professional sports leagues, but there are people out there actively trying to derail things, and they're doing so by just focusing on absolutely nonsense, on nothing to do with the sports and the leagues and the athletes themselves. When it comes to women's sports, the stick-to-sports crowd refuses to do so. Then those media pundits who peddle in controversy have stumbled into a gold mine and continue to strip mine it. Hold on one second. This toxicity takes away from the one thing we should all be focused on as a society, gender equality. That brings me to another thing that's just equally confusing about all of this. Why is gender equality such a bad thing? Why is it such a negative? Even if you don't watch women's sports, even if you don't like women's sports, its success, its growth is a net positive for just about everyone. And it's not just sports, by the way. There was that old survey from McKinsey in 2015 that found if women were working to their full potential, the global GDP would increase by $28 trillion by 2025. Now it's almost 2025, and I think it's fairly safe to say that $25 trillion GDP boost would have come in handy. Alas, who wants economic success if it means equality comes with it? To better understand the impact and just why it's so stupid to root against women's sports in general, I want to play everyone's favorite philosophy game, Skulls Wager! Who am I kidding? Anyone who studied philosophy is going to hate me for invoking Pascal's wager, but I'm doing it anyway. So here's the deal. Let's look at the outcomes when it comes to women's sports. Here we have women's sports being supported and not being supported, and then a scenario where it is popular and unpopular. If women's sports do not receive support and opportunities but remain unpopular, nothing changes. If women's sports receive support and opportunities and are unpopular, well, we tried something and now we know it doesn't work. If women's sports receive support and opportunities and are popular, we have a huge new industry and are better off as a society since greater equality now exists. Finally, if women's sports does not receive support and opportunities but would be popular, everyone loses jobs, loses opportunities, and we are worse off as a society. It doesn't really matter what your thoughts are on women's sports, love them or hate them. When you look at the wager, there's only one bet here that makes sense. The upside of women's sports being successful through support and opportunities trumps every other outcome out there, and it's not particularly close. The thing is, gender equality needs to operate on a two-way street. To that end, it needs to be okay. It needs to be socially acceptable to not like women's sports or to not want to follow them. This is, after all, a form of entertainment. Some will enjoy it, others will not, and if the latter happens to be the case, it doesn't mean someone is a misogynist. Now, of course, they can be, but someone may have a legitimate reason as to why they don't want to watch or follow women's sport. Just in the same way, people do not like golf or NASCAR or baseball or tennis or any number of other sports out there. Not everyone is going to like everything all the time. Better yet though, there are opportunities to receive constructive feedback as to what women's sports can do to improve. If you cannot freely express these opinions though, then you don't really have gender equality at all. You've just swung the pendulum from one side to the other. Saying women's soccer is bad because it's just some PC mumbo jumbo or I don't like the women or this, that, or the other, that of course is not a legitimate reason to reject it as a sport. Alternatively, allow me to air a critique that really hurts my enjoyment of women's soccer. The standard of goalkeeping at many levels is simply not very good. I fully understand that there isn't enough emphasis on goalkeeper coaching at all levels of the women's soccer pyramid. Too many youth coaches will simply stick the tallest player they have in goal regardless of aptitude. Now, there are reasons I appreciate as to why that is the case. Primarily, women's soccer hasn't had the resources and support to invest in goalkeeper coaching, again, at all levels of the sport. That is why greater visibility is required at the highest level. It can hopefully bring in more funds and more players and more coaches, which can be used to correct the goalkeeping issues. It is a complex issue, but I still believe this to be a fairly reasonable critique today. Right now, when I'm thinking about watching a women's soccer match, do I want to invest the time, my entertainment time, into seeing that, knowing there are goalkeeper issues? Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no. This, by the way, is no different than when I pause before watching a baseball game thinking, will I see something interesting happen, or is it just going to be a bunch of strikeouts over and over and over again? Of course, if I were to ever share this criticism, this critique on social media, I would get fucking eviscerated by people who either refuse to accept the truth, don't want to understand the complexities of the actual issue at hand. Hell, if anyone actually watches this video, I'm guessing the comment section is lighting me up over what I just said. Let me tell you something though, gender equality in sports ain't blind, unwavering support. You can take that weak sauce propaganda back to North Korea where it belongs. There is another thing I do want to point out here. It's something that's been mentioned before, but I don't think receives enough attention. The current discourse around women's sports is completely unfair on the athletes who want to play the games and who want to grow the sports they are participating in. They have simply been caught up in the crossfire. Sorry, I just couldn't help myself. Anyway, none of this is their own doing. They didn't put themselves in this situation where they now find themselves stuck in the middle of these increasingly toxic arguments where people are arguing things that don't even need to be argued. It's just disappointing. In a certain sense, it would be awesome if we could think of women's sports as just sports. Why does gender matter after all? It should be about the sport, the competition, the athletes, all of that. This is what is important. The athletes just happening to be women doesn't really change anything. Of course, we cannot have that because there are folks out there wanting to disrupt the entire landscape with comically misconstrued arguments that claim to be about women's sports, but actually aren't about women's sports at all. That being said, we as a society need to ensure progress is being made toward equality, including in sports. Men had a long runway to make professional sports a thing in America. Women certainly deserve that opportunity as well. We will never know if it is popular, if it is good, if it does resonate with the general public unless they are given that same support over a long period of time. There is nothing controversial about saying women deserve the same opportunity in sports that men have received over the years. Besides, America is the land of opportunity. Taking that away from anyone means you ain't no patriot and you probably hate the US of A. As Brian Zane over at Wrestling with Regret is fond of saying, like what you like, but don't be a dick. It applies to pro wrestling and it applies to sports as well. With that in mind, thank you for watching this video, unless you hopped in the comment section and wrote some mean-spirited, nonsensical rambling about why I am an idiot. If you did that, well, you can go eat sand. Until next time, I am Shine Hollis. This is the Touchback, and as always, hashtag take it up to the 25.
You get caught in the crossfire.